Hello, my name is Opal Singleton. I'm the president and CEO of an organization called Million Kids. Million Kids, not 1 million, not 10 million, not a million, just millionkids.org. We are a 501c3 nonprofit located out of Southern California. However, we cover the entire United States. And Million Kids is an organization that educates. We are basically the trainer across the nation for advocates that want to combat human trafficking and online exploitation. We've been doing that about 15 years. There's about 8 of us. I happen to be the president, but there are some very, very fine people that are experts in this business. Many of them have retired from Homeland Security or law enforcement or some sort of agency where we are all about protecting kids. We're known for our research and following cases and looking at the latest technologies and trying to understand what we can do to keep our kids safe from predators, especially as it relates to sex trafficking. And also, of late, we're really, really heavy into online exploitation and preventing that. Understanding all the changes that are going on. And that is exactly what this podcast is all about. Online exploitation is probably the fastest growing crime in the world, I would guess, especially of minors. And if you follow this program, one of the things that we do is teach people all the various ways that predators use technology to access, groom, and recruit our kids online, and all the things that we can do so that it doesn't happen to anyone else. It is such a fast-growing crime because of technology. We're about to release our ebook, and it'll be called Digital Warfare. When it comes out, I highly recommend that you purchase that book. It'll be online, and you won't believe all the ways that technology is changing online exploitation. Well, this is a fascinating podcast this time, I think, because I want to talk about an article that I saw. I can't tell you that I'm going to draw a conclusion. In fact, I'll give you my email address. If you draw conclusions, I'd encourage you to feel that you can share that. In fact, I'll do that right now, and then we'll come back to it. My email address is opal, O-P-A-L, opal, at millionkids.org, and I'll give that to you again. So what we do is that we see research from around the world on things like gangs and cartels and online exploitation and the latest technology. And there was a story that came out this week that is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I really wanted to share it with you because we've passed it around amongst the 8 of us and said, what do you think about this? Now, I am having trouble nailing down any kind of date that this article was actually published. The one I'm looking at said 1 day ago. So what confuses me about it is they tell this unbelievable story, which I'm going to relate to you, but at the end of the article, they say 2 years after her ordeal, I'm having trouble talking today, 2 years after her ordeal, her daughter's doing better. So the story is written like it just happened, but it says 1 day ago. So I'm not sure what to think about it, but if it happened 2 years ago, God only knows where it's at today. So here's the headlines, published by Associated Press, and it says, headline is, students have been arrested for false alarms from AI surveillance. Let me give that to you again, because you may want to Google or track down this particular story. Students have been arrested for false alarms from AI surveillance. That's the headline. So the story starts out with a lady by the name of Leslie Mathis, and this is her 13-year-old daughter, according to the story. And it really gets your attention about this. And I think to myself, in some ways, this is a real opportunity. In other ways, this is just unbelievable that this actually happened. But in other ways, I think that it's an important story on how we protect our kids. So let me give you the story. Leslie knows that what her daughter did was wrong. However, she never expected it to happen the way that it did. And in fact, her 13-year-old daughter was arrested. So what did the daughter do? Well, she's using the school email or school communications system somehow, the computer system, and she made an offensive joke while she was chatting online with her classmates. Now, this sounds like she wasn't actually in school, so that makes me believe all these kids can access the school's communication anytime they want to. I'm sure it's password protected. But this girl is online with her classmates, and she makes an offensive joke. And nobody disagrees that this was done in bad taste, and she apologizes for it, and she shouldn't have done it. But this girl is an 8th grader from Tennessee. And what happened is the minute that she, no, not the minute, but shortly thereafter, let's make that clear, shortly thereafter this happened, law enforcement came in and arrested her, picked her up, took her to jail, strip searched her, interrogated her, and she spent a night in jail. Now, that seems extreme to me, but anyway, maybe not. So what did she do? She said that earlier in the day, her friends had teased her because she had a new tan complexion, and they called her a Mexican, even though she's not Mexican. When a friend asked what she was planning for Thursday, she wrote, "Thursday we kill all the Mexicos." Now that's tacky, okay? I get it. I suspect every one of us have made some comment that wasn't in great taste and like that. But she happened to say, on Thursday we kill all the Mexicos on the school computer system. So think about how that's going to look in this if somebody picks that up. Well, it turns out not only does somebody pick it up, but artificial intelligence is listening in on everything the students do. And in this case, she agrees it was wrong and stupid. Mom agrees that it was wrong and stupid. But suddenly, that afternoon, they show up and they arrest her and they take her down to jail, interrogate her, strip search her, and she spends the night in a jail cell. Now, apparently, they wouldn't even let the parents in. Now, I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I probably do know how I feel about that. If you've got a minor in there, it would probably be good to let the parent in my opinion, so at least people can get to the bottom of this. The parent said, "It made me feel like, is this the America we live in? Yeah, this is stupid, but the technology is stupid. That is just going through picking up random words and not looking at context." Well, she's probably emotional. All of us would be to see your 13-year-old daughter strip searched and sitting in a jail cell. So what happened here? This was picked up by AI. And AI is used in the surveillance system. Let me give you the explanation from the article. I usually don't quote the article quite this much, but I want you to see the context of this and get the idea of exactly the big picture of what is happening. It says surveillance systems in American schools increasingly monitor everything students write on a school account or a school device. Now, before we go any further, I want to point out, at some point, she must have signed some sort of documentation about what she was willing and not willing to do on a school device and a school account. But if we don't have contracts with kids, they need to sign these contracts, and they need to understand the seriousness of what is about to happen. Having said that, it says thousands of school districts across the country use software that is called Gaggle and Lightspeed Alert. These are two software systems that are specifically for school systems. And they're tracking their online activity, looking for signs that they may hurt themselves or others. With the help of AI, technology can dip into online conversations and immediately notify both school officials and law enforcement. So it sounded like school officials and law enforcement in this case were immediately notified because she's using words like kill. And we need, before anybody goes on a device, to understand how powerful those words are. In defense of it, educators are saying that technology has saved lives. Against it, critics warn that it criminalizes children for careless words. It has routinized, I haven't ever seen that word before, routinized law enforcement access and presence in students' lives, including in their home. So I think that's an interesting kind of offshoot of this story. She's not at school doing this. She's at home, or at least outside the school, but she is using the school system. Now, to be fair, if this kid later came in, and we don't know anything about who's saying it when it's said, it's just that she suggested to kill the Mexicos, which is interesting terminology. But think about all the school shootings we've had across America. On the one hand, I get it. If we could do something that would save a school or a predator from coming in, or a school kid coming in with their guns or whatever and shooting students, then we probably ought to do everything we can to prevent that. On the other hand, I was thinking, if she's on the school system, you need to have a contract that is very blatant, that any use of that, will be the result of it, that you are on a borrowed system. This is not your personalized account, if you will, or your personalized system. You are sharing a school system. Now, I can well imagine in the mind of a 13-year-old, can you tell I'm going on back and forth on both sides of this fence? I'm going, oh my gosh, you'd just die if that was your child. But then, on the other hand, we got to do everything we can to protect our kids. And so I'm saying to myself, this is an interesting story. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure I'm going to draw conclusions. I want you to draw your own, and you're welcome to share them with me. I have some ideas I'll share with you at the end, but they're not conclusions per se. So in this case, it turns out that AI is being used in American school systems to surveil every student who has an account in an online device. So I'm sure they have hashtags. So I'm saying, what if a nude is sent? What if somebody asks for a nude? Because they say 1 out of 6 boys and 1 out of 7 girls have sent a nude. Those are dangerous. Anytime you have a nude online, you have greatly increased your chances of being exploited. And if not now, in the future, because those nudes, they don't just poof, they go away. They don't dissolve in a timely manner, per se. Once it's online, it's online. And so I was fascinated to find out this is going on, and part of me wants to say, oh, what if they use the word nude? What if somebody asks for a nude? What if they send an image with a hashtag that would qualify as CSAM, meaning an underage person that's in a sexual kind of image? Can they intervene on those? Not that the child should go to jail. I'm not promoting that. But I'm saying, maybe this technology could help us with sextortion. It's worth a thought. Anyway, this is a quote that is going on by Elizabeth Laird. She is the director for Center of Democracy and Technology. And so the article goes on to say, in a country wary of school shootings, several states have taken a harder line on threats to school. Among them happens to be the state that she's in, which is Tennessee. By the way, one of the Million Kids research and presenters and does tremendous work in making presentations to young people and parents and law enforcement. He's retired sheriff out here in LA who retired over there in Tennessee. He shows me pictures of his house on the lake, and life is good apparently. But he does make presentations back there, named Clark Morrow. If you're interested, contact us. He can come out and speak if you're in Tennessee. But Tennessee has chosen to take a zero tolerance law about threats of mass violence against a school and should be reported to law enforcement immediately. So I give them credit for that, because we have got to stop this school shooting. And we need to stop, especially financial sextortion, where people from overseas are accessing our kids and they look like a hot little 14-year-old down the street. And the next thing you know, they've got a nude going out and they're being blackmailed. And more than 40 of those, mostly young males, and just spectacular young males, very accomplished, have taken their own lives. So I'm always looking for a way for an early alert to find out that this kind of blackmail is going on, so that maybe quickly somebody can intervene and that young person has alternatives other than to lose a precious life. So as this is going on, they're saying the 13-year-old girl was arrested for texting with friends on a chat function tied to her school. Her school was Fairview Middle School. That was the name of my school, by the way, which uses Gaggle to monitor students' accounts. So they're not saying who this is in this case. So she's 13 years old and she's texting on a chat function tied to a school. Now, whether or not this young lady even remembers that chat function is tied to a school, or does she see it as her personal chat function, that's a whole nother discussion that needs to take place. Any time you have a student or a young person that is using something tied to a school, maybe you ought to get this case and read it to them and let them understand. I'll give you the headline one more time if I piqued your interest. The headline, if you want to Google it, is "Students Have Been Arrested for False Alarms from AI Surveillance." Students have been arrested for false alarms from AI surveillance. Well, she was taken to jail, she was interrogated, she was strip searched, and her parents weren't allowed to talk to her till the next day. Now, the parents are filing a lawsuit against the school system. She couldn't understand why they wouldn't let her parents be in there. In fact, she thought the parents were deliberately refusing to come see her. Now, all of that's unnecessary. There are ways to handle this, and I don't see that cutting out a parent is helpful. We see them out here in California where they choose not to let parents in if they're talking about whether or not they want to change their sex life or something. It's a fascinating thing to me, because if you're under 18, the parent is responsible in case of lawsuit, and yet out here, even in a lot of these situations, they won't let the parent in on what is happening. So a court ordered 8 weeks of house arrest. That seems pretty severe to me. I think you could have handled it in 2 weeks. That's severely interrupting a 13-year-old from being able to be at school. She got 8 weeks plus a psychological evaluation. Okay, I'm not against that. And then 20 days at an alternative school for girls. I think that's absolutely way too severe. Now, they didn't ask my opinion, and they don't care. They probably won't care about yours either. Okay, but it's an interesting thing. That is harsh punishment. I mean, that would be as if somebody had taken a gun to school or something. I get that this was bad. I get that. So does her parents. And I don't think that she should just skate. I agree there ought to be some consequences. But to put her in an alternative school for that long could greatly put this girl on a wrong track. I honestly think that a lot less severe punishment and maybe some more emotional support would have been a better solution in this case. If you spend 20 days in alternative school, you're exposed to gang people in there in a big way. And this girl is probably a regular kid, a fine kid who made a bad mistake. I'm not saying there aren't consequences. These consequences seem extreme to me. So they interviewed the CEO of Gaggle. I thought this was an interesting thing. They said that the school system did not use Gaggle the way it was intended. He said, actually, the purpose is to find the warning signs and intervene before problems escalate to law enforcement. So it sounds like maybe one of the glitches here is that the school is alerted and then law enforcement's alerted. And I think that if they're going to have a law enforcement response, they need to be specially trained for this kind of thing. And even the head of Gaggle is saying this seems to be a little bit over the top. He said, I wish they had treated it as a teachable moment, not a law enforcement moment. Well, sir, I guess it's a Sir Jeff Patterson. Yes, I agree with you a whole lot. They need to escalate it. Certainly, they need to get her attention. But the kinds of things that are happening could force her a life down the wrong track. And that's unfortunate. At 13 years old, you're still trying to figure out who you are and what you want to grow up to be. Spend that kind of time in an alternative school and 8 weeks away from your friends, that is a lifetime for a 13-year-old. And it can change her life dramatically. So on the one hand, I agree that she made a mistake. She needs to have some consequences. The consequences seem a little extreme to me. So students who think they are chatting privately among friends usually or often do not realize that they are under constant surveillance. This is an education attorney talking. Keep in mind, education attorneys usually are all about suing schools. But one teenage girl that this attorney represented said she made a joke about school shootings on a private Snapchat story. And the Snapchat's automated detection software picked up the comment and alerted the FBI, and the girl was arrested on school grounds. I get it. You go on a school ground and you mention school shooting. I get it. Everything should stop immediately. There's a lot more at stake than you, because you don't know if they're serious or not serious. And in a school shooting threat, you have to take it seriously. However, I also think that there needs to be some discernment about what's going on here. This case that this attorney is quoting quotes someone named Alexis, forgive me if I screw this name up, I can't pronounce it, Manganitis, I think it is. Manganitis, okay. She said she was startled by how quickly the monitoring software works. Now, I don't know if this took place on a school. Yeah, it sounds like took place on a school setting. She was at West Palm Beach Dreyfus School of the Arts last year piloted a program called Lightspeed Alert. So the first school was using something called Gaggle. These people are using something called Lightspeed Alert, a surveillance program. Interviewing a teacher for a school newspaper, Alexis discovered two students once typed something threatening about that teacher on a school computer, then deleted it. But even though, and I found this fascinating, even though it was deleted, Lightspeed picked it up, and they were taken away 5 minutes later. So I get that. You threaten a teacher, and you're doing it on a school system. You cannot threaten teachers, you cannot talk about school shootings, and you shouldn't talk about killing somebody without thinking that something's going to happen. Having said that, if you're going to use AI and school surveillance on this, then we have to start to understand that somewhere in between needs to have some line of interference that is consistent with the crime. And I can't help but think that if they have all this technology, why aren't they interfering with more of the sextortion activity that is taking place? So if an adult makes a super racist joke that's threatening on their computer, they can delete it and nobody would be arrested. But in this case, they made a joke and then they deleted, and what happened here is they, rather than being proactive, they were punished anyway. So these systems are designed to be warning signs for self-harm, for bullying, violence, or abuse. So, there's two sides to this discussion. And I think that it's a healthy discussion to have, which is why I'm having this podcast. It says the technologies can also involve law enforcement in responses to mental health crises. In Florida's Polk County Schools, a district of more than 100,000 students, the school safety program received more than 500 Gaggle alerts over a 4-year period. So that's a lot. That's 125 a year. And the officers said that 72 were involuntarily hospitalized, under the Baker Act, meaning they were suggesting that they had some sort of mental health issue going, whether it was a threat to harm themselves or others. So it is helpful on many times. You get a child who is self-destructing, that is wanting to take their own life or the life of somebody else, then we have to address that, and we should address it quickly. And, as I combat sextortion, I got to tell you, I'm just kind of thinking to myself, maybe this could be used for sextortion. You see the word nude, you have a hashtag of a nude image. Why aren't those looked at very quickly? It says a really high number of children who experience involuntary examination remember it as being traumatic and damaging, not as something that's helpful to them, and that's worth looking at. Is that a mental health issue that's real and that needs interference, or is it something that they're making jokes about? So the information allows school to access software effectiveness, has a high rate of false alarms, and is closely held by technology companies. In other words, they won't tell you how often this happens that it's not real, and it's a false alarm. Keep in mind, this is being done by artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence makes mistakes, as we all know. If you've ever tried to talk to a customer service agent that's an AI bot, and you try to argue with the thing, good luck. And so these people are trying to analyze, and these bots are trying to analyze life and death situations based on terminology used. It said that Gaggle alerted more than 1,200 incidents in Lawrence, Kansas, in only a 10-month period. But about 2/3 of those were deemed by school officials as not being relevant or non-issues, including 200 false alarms from student homework. And I can see this. If you have a piece of homework that's dealing with issues that's mental health issues, it's a challenge. They go on to say students in one photography class were called to the principal office over concerns that Gaggle had detected nudity. So see, they can detect nudity. Maybe we should be using it to protect our sextortion victims. The photos have been automatically deleted by the students' Google Drive, but the students have backups of the flagged images on their own devices to show that it was a false alarm. The district office said later they adjusted the software setting to reduce false alarms. Probably the student and the bot has a different opinion of what's nude and what's nudity and what's sexual. So this is not a science. Trust me, these are early days that we're looking at this. So this person goes on to say when she graduated, she was flagged for editing a college essay because it contained the words mental health. Well, if you could flag everything I do because I'm combating sex trafficking and online exploitation. So if we're going to just use it by keywords, then we're all in trouble. So she goes on to say, I think ideally we wouldn't stick a new and shiny solution of AI on a deep-rooted issue such as teenage mental health and the suicide rates in America, but that's what is happening. So on this, and I want to point out, she's among a group of students that's involved in a lawsuit, so she has something at stake there. So school officials have said that they take in concerns about Gaggle seriously, and also say that technology's detected dozens of imminent threats of suicide or violence. So they're looking at it. Someone on the Board of Education in Costell says sometimes you have to look at the trade for the greater good. And then it goes on to say at the end of this article, I'm all caught up in this article, at the end of it goes, so after 2 years, Mathis' daughter's doing better, and she's still terrified of running into one of the school officers who arrested her. 2 years ago, they don't start out this article. They needed to do that because technology's changed a lot in 2 years. And hopefully it's become more refined and more sophisticated. So I'm a little concerned about the article because they start out with the salacious nature of this and take you clear to the end of it when they go, oh, by the way, this was 2 years ago. So in closing, and it's time to close this podcast, I'm going to give you my email address. I welcome your thoughts. I'm on both sides of this fence, as you can tell. I will do anything to protect a kid. And, these school shootings, and especially you get into nudify sites and kids that are blackmailing other kids or sending out these deep fakes where kids are online nudes. We want to pick that up. And hopefully this technology can be modified so that happens. On one hand, I get all excited that this might be a solution to protecting kids against extortion. On the other hand, I would hope that never again is a 13-year-old girl whisked out of there and strip searched and put in a jail cell and then sent off to an alternative school in a length of time that will change her life forever. So there are two sides to this issue. I welcome you to give me your comments. You can do that at opal, O-P-A-L, at millionkids.org. I hope you will follow us at millionkids.org. Sign up for our newsletter. You get all the latest stuff just like this. And if this podcast is helpful to you, I hope that you will consider supporting Million Kids financially. You can do that by either going onto our website and seeing our P.O. box and mailing those checks. I'm old-fashioned. I like checks. Or you can go on and use all the latest technologies to hit donate and send us a donation so that we can continue this work for you. My name is Opal Singleton. I'm the president and CEO of millionkids.org. Please follow us and support us in your prayers and with your finances. We appreciate you. I'll see you on the next podcast. Follow us and support us in your prayers and with your finances. We appreciate you. I'll see you on the next podcast.